Welcome everyone to this career exploration workshop on public sector budgeting and financial management. I'm Lee Youssef, and I am pleased to organize and host this workshop that is a collaboration between the Association for Budgeting and Financial Management, ABFM, and the Career Pathways program at Old Dominion University. ABFM is a section of the American Society for Public Administration, and the organization offers a spring professional development workshop series. This workshop is part of that series, and I encourage you to check out the recordings of previous events in this series, which are available on YouTube. The ODU Career Pathways program is a university-wide career and professional development program for graduate students and postdocs. Today's workshop is part of the Career Exploration series that we regularly offer as part of our Preparing Future Professionals certificate. So as you consider different careers that leverage your graduate education, I encourage you to check out the different career exploration workshops on the Career Pathways YouTube channel. For today's career exploration workshop, we have three public budgeting and financial management professionals who will be sharing their perspectives and insights from their careers. We will have Q&A at the end of the panel discussion, so please ask your questions then. You can type your questions into the chat so that you don't forget to ask those questions. Welcome, Ken Hunter, Sabrina Jameson, and Caitlin James. Thank you for joining us for this workshop. And I'd like to start the discussion by asking each panelist to introduce themselves and their educational experience. I've specifically asked them to briefly talk about how different aspects of their graduate education has helped with their career path. We're going to start with Ken, go to Sabrina, and then Caitlin. Ken, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Youssef, and thank you everyone for joining. My name is Kenneth Hunter. I have been working in public budgeting and finance now this is my 28th year working in this field in the public sector. Started off working in purchasing and grants management, and for the last 22, 23 years have been working primarily in public sector budgeting. When I started my education in college as an undergrad at Tennessee Technological University, I started off as an engineering major. Even though I had a very strong interest in history and political science, that's kind of where I thought I was going to go because of my interest also in math and science. After 1 year, I made the decision to switch to earning dual degrees in history and political science. And of course, you start wondering, how exactly are you going to apply that to an actual career? And once I made it to graduate school, starting off as a master's in political science student at the University of Georgia, and then switching over to their MPA program, I found that there were opportunities that I could apply my interest in political science and government, as well as the skills that I had developed in mathematics and other areas, to building a career in public sector budgeting and finance, especially at the local level. All of my experience in government has been at the local level. And I would say that the courses that I've taken in policy analysis, as well as the public financial management courses, and more importantly, the second year courses that really provide more in-depth looking at the issues that face public finance, whether it be from a overall financial perspective or budgeting perspective, are very key, as well as the experience that I gained during my internship with the municipality in Georgia during my time as a graduate student.
All right, Sabrina, on to you.
I'm Sabrina Jameson. I am currently a senior financial manager for the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. Originally, I didn't start out to be just like Ken, probably this wasn't the path that we originally said, hey, and you may not say, hey, I want to go one day and be in, public finance or whatever. Things just happen. My education started, I have a psychology degree, a bachelor's degree in psychology. That's what started because I thought I wanted to be a counselor. Before that, I thought I wanted to be an attorney, but then I thought I was a counselor. And so then somebody was like, "Oh, get a degree in public administration or whatever." And so then that's when I started working for the state of Texas. So I working for the state of Texas. I got a degree in public administration. Still was like thinking that, since I was born and raised, like I was raised in like the Boys and Girls Club, a whole lot of nonprofit. I always thought that my things would be like policy. You know what I mean? Public policy was going to be my thing. I even did public policy even for the state of Texas. Um, but then I had decided I thought I wanted to get my PhD, whatever. And so that's where I met at the University of Oklahoma. I was getting my PhD in public administration. But then I figured out that I don't want to sit still and be a teacher. I don't want to be a professor. I don't want to, that's not something that I really wanted to do or whatever. I wanted to like be out there making a difference. And to be honest with you guys or whatever, I didn't even, I halfway paid attention in the public finance classes because I was like, there's never, ever, 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 ever any way I'm going to be doing anything to do with public finance. Mind you, I've worked at probably every bank you could name back in the day or whatever, being a teller or being a whatever, officer at a bank or whatever while I was in college. So I knew all of that, that math stuff, but I didn't want to do all that math stuff that Ken likes or whatever. I was like, nope, none of the math stuff, none of the number stuff. Nope. I just want to go talk to the people. Well, I did end up in public finance at the state of Ohio. I started there in like a childcare doing a program, putting a program together for childcare and the monitoring and stuff. And then it was like a position came open doing some things that had to do with public finance for the local agencies because like we're in the middle, and so we provide technical assistance and provide funding and all the stuff to local agencies or whatever, um, out in the county agencies because Ohio is a county administered state. So basically, to all the 88 counties, we have to deal with 88 counties all the time and all of their nuances. And so then I ended up there or whatever. The first person that hired me, she was like, "Oh, we just knew you could do the job." I was like, "I don't have experience in this." She's like, "You can do the job." So then I ended up there, and so now I get to talk about depreciation and talk about buildings and you know what I mean or whatever. So I mean, it sounds boring, but it's not really that boring because of all of the I think for me, I'm a people person, and so it's like all of the people I get to go and talk to and meet in all the associations and the lobby groups and all of that or whatever, especially since my office is across the street from the state capitol. So I get to do a lot of that. So that's how a short story, my foray. I've been in here. I've been at the state of Ohio for 20 years. So it'll be 20 years this year. So
Caitlin.
All right. My name's Caitlin James. I'm the Deputy Director of Budget for the City of Virginia Beach. I got my bachelor's degree from Old Dominion in political science. And like Ken, I wanted to know how I could use that in the real world. So I applied to the Master's in Public Administration program. Also at ODU, I graduated in 2014. I thought the NPA program was phenomenal, and it really helped with my career in budgeting because no one goes to school wanting to be a budget analyst. I talk to my staff about this all the time. No one grows up wanting to be a budget analyst, but anyone who has any sort of intellectual curiosity can make a good budget analyst, I think. So the MPA program helped with that foundation. Obviously, the budgeting class was helpful, but every class was helpful with that foundation, especially public policy. Budget analysts do a lot of policy, not a lot of numbers. So a lot of people that work for me aren't even particularly good at math, but they can be. They're good enough at math, but they wouldn't say math is their strong suit. As far as like the educational requirements of the MPA program that I thought were the most helpful to me was the internship requirement. Getting that internship, I don't know if it's still a requirement with the MPA program, but it was really helpful to see what local government is. I've worked in local government for 10 years now, and I can't imagine being anywhere different. So yeah, MPAs are great for anyone that wants to go into any level of government, but local will always be my favorite.
All right. So I've heard about intellectual curiosity. I've heard about it's not a boring job. It's something that could work for, somebody who's a people's person. So to help our audience better understand the range of work in this area, can you share some examples or some exciting aspects of your work? Or are there specific aspects that you find particularly stimulating? Sabrina, will let you kick this off, and then Ken and Caitlin.
Well, what I like to do, I guess I like to figure things out. Like I think it's kind of like what Caitlin said or whatever. If you just have that curiosity and you just love to figure things out, there are times where they're like, what I love is like our director would come to us and say, "Hey, we're getting these federal dollars." how should we give this? How should we use this? How do we give this out? And so my group or whatever, we write the policies or whatever, which is fun. And we do like all the cost allocation, and we talk to the counties and all the stuff and work with them to see how to figure it out. And so I think that collaborating with, since we're state, collaborating with the local and collaborating with the associations, the collaboration part to me is like the best part of the job, because she's right, because Caitlin was right. None of my people, first of all, government math is not regular math. So people who come in thinking that, hey, I worked as an accountant for Chase or something like that or whatever, they be sorely disappointed if they're working in government, because government math is not the same. So I think that and I think that's the fun part of, like, there's new things coming down all the time or whatever. If you like to stay in flux, if you like, I always say at our agency, if you like organized chaos, you would love our agency or whatever. You would never get bored with it. And so I think that that's like the best part. Other examples is like just new things come down all the time. Like, for example, the Medicaid may change federally, and it's like, hey, now we want everybody to work. We need people to work. So how do we pay counties their administrative costs for having people work? And what are the things to go through it? And we only have this amount of money. And so how do we figure out how to do this with this small amount of money? Which is a lot of time is the state and local questions in the first place, is how do I do this with the little bit of money they've given me? So I think that for me, that's my example. I'll let somebody else probably have a better example than I do.
Well, thank you, Sabrina. And what I would say, this job always presents a new challenge each day. I've been here in Rocky Mount now for over 18 years. This will be my 19th budget that I'm working on right now for the city. And Rocky Mount is like a lot of other municipalities in that it is not just the general government services that most people associate with the municipality that we provide. Here in Rocky Mount, we are also a full utility service provider. We provide electricity service, natural gas, water, sewer. We also have utility for stormwater management to help out when the rains come to keep from flooding. And for those of you who want to know, Rocky Mount is on Interstate 95. If you happen to be in the Tidewater area, you can either get on 64 over to 95 and come down and see us. We're about 2.5 hours away, or you can come actually back roads and come see us another way. So there's a couple different ways you can get to us. But overall, our budget is well over $200 million a year for a city of about 55,000 residents, because of those different operations we have. And we have to manage them all together. So you're managing general government operations, general fund and special revenue funds, as well as enterprise utilities that you're treating as separate business units. And you have shared services that require cost allocation. You have to deal not only with the setting and forecasting of tax revenues and other revenues from general government fees, but also the revenues associated with operating utilities, which have a certain dynamic effect that can be affected by weather as much as it can be affected by economic conditions. And so, and also with respect to operations, you're having to incorporate various elements of forecasting. Certainly budgeting is not does not require a type of mathematics associated with engineering or other things. And Excel is certainly very helpful in that it can do most of it for you if you know the formulas. The fact of the matter is, though, is it does require a lot of analytical work, and it's very important. It is not, however, analytical work that is purely quantitative from a numeric perspective. In the areas of performance evaluation and performance management, you want to make sure that you're being efficient and effective in the delivery of services that residents have, because you, just like all of your fellow coworkers and certainly the elected bodies that y'all serve, are there to meet and exceed the expectations of the residents. And so keeping that in mind with respect to the decisions that have to be made, whether it's in preparing annual budgets, and as I like to remind students and interns, budgets are law. At their core, they are a legal document that sets a ceiling on how much a jurisdiction can use in terms of financial resources to provide the services that are expected in any given period of time or a specific period of time. It's also important to remember how it is that the residents that you are serving are benefited by the services that are being paid for. And that can cross all different characteristics. It depends on the jurisdiction or the agency you work for. It depends on what the mission of that given group is. And at the end of the day, you realize that even if it seems like it's very narrow, it still has the potential to have a wide impact with respect to society as a whole.
Before I go to Caitlin, if I could maybe ask a follow-up of Sabrina piggybacking off of Ken's comment about it's not just the kind of the quantitative data analysis. Sometimes there's more kind of qualitative and thinking about the different dimensions of performance and things like that. Sabrina, can you maybe talk a little bit more about some of the analytical stuff, quantitative and qualitative, that you do in your job?
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest analytical things that we have to do is like I think, and Ken said it too, is like cost allocation. So the thing about it is that like at JFS, we get all of our federal funding from from HHS, from FNS, from DOL. So we get federal funding from so many different agencies, you know what I mean, or whatever. And so then we have to decide how to, how to allocate that funding to the state on one hand, and also since we're county administered to the 88 counties. So deciding that and having to maintain that, we have like a random moment sampling a system that we use or whatever that we send out to all of the county agencies that they have to use in order to pick like activities they do, so that in order to help us with cost allocation. Um, so we do a lot of that. We do a lot of analytics too when it comes to, because of the fact that we're always on the forefront when it's budget time for the state. Because since we're administered county, all the counties have somebody in there wanting some money, talking about money. So we're always doing analysis on like what did we give, like what do we issue to them the past 10 years or whatever. Or if we issued them this amount of money this year, then what would that look like? So we always have to do like those kind of analytics and those kind of analysis. We have things like, okay, there's so many stats. A lot of the funds that we issue we use an allocation methodology. So therefore, you'd have to be able to use the methodologies in order to know how much counties get, what you're giving to them. And a lot of the methodologies have to do with like census data. There's unemployment data. There's social services data, like how many aged 55 and older. So it just all depends on um, the methodologies. And so we do a lot of that. We have to also determine like what our child care rates are. We have to do, so we have, yeah, so we do a lot of that. I'm also in my unit, we're also responsible for reporting back federal reporting. So I am the owner of my group. We own our own financial information system. And so therefore we have a hand on a lot of data anyways, and we're doing analytics or whatever, because the counties have to report all of we issue out our allocations to them through the system, and they have to report back everything. So then we have to go through and do an analysis of all of our federal reporting before we send it up to the federal government, so that we can get back the proper amount of funds that we should get. So yeah, so it is very analytical, because you can catch it. Like I'll say, for example, the other day, someone caught the fact that a county misreported like $6 million to FNS. Mind you, we caught that and we were like, oh my gosh, that's $6 million back to us, the state of Ohio. So you have to be able to not just type in numbers. You have to be able to look at those numbers and be like, wait, hold up. That doesn't look right or whatever, and like Ken says, Excel is a great tool, but you got to know how to use it. Did that answer the question that you
Yes,
back up in the chat?
thank
Okay.
you. All right, Caitlin, on
Right.
to you.
Well, I guess I think the best part about budget, and this is what I tell new hires or any intern that we have, is that no 2 days are the same. Ken kind of said that with his, right? He's been doing this for almost 20 years, and I've been doing it for almost 10. And I mean, our responsibilities range. I mean, our smallest department has a budget of 45,000, and our largest department has a budget of 400 million. I mean, the city is extremely varied in what we do. Um, some of the things I love the most are the public engagement that we get to do as budget professionals. Something I'm the most proud of is the city of Virginia Beach had a large bond referendum for flood protection a few years ago, and I did the financing plan for it, and it's pretty cool to say that. We get to work on tax policy, we do research, grants, we get to do fiscal impacts. So anytime a developer wants to do a project and partner with the city of Virginia Beach, budget and management services responsibility is to do the fiscal impact on the return on investment and make recommendations to the city council on whether or not we should do it. And it's fascinating, and really no 2 days are the same. A good example of that is we just finished budget hearings with departments. We have a large parks and recreation department who asked for more staffing for the city's athletic complex. And budget ultimately recommended no on the proposal. And the director of the department may have been a little frustrated with us and said that we really needed to come out to the athletic field and see for ourselves what their need was. So I said, okay. And so a lot of my staff are going to go out and work an event to really analyze and see how it really works. And it's just fun because you get to do something as small as that to as big as a flood protection program. Really, the best part is that you never know what you're getting into. I used to be an accountant for the health department for the Commonwealth of Virginia, and every day was the same. And I didn't enjoy that very much, but budgeting is just so varied in what your responsibilities are. And it's truly great, even if you don't grow up wanting to be a budget analyst.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned the bond issuance and the flood protection program, because my team actually worked on the community engagement
I know.
component for that project. So it was a great project.
Yeah.
And I think the other part of that is then see the impact of your work on the ground, as for example, with
Yes.
those bonds and the flood protection measures going into construction or being implemented. You actually then see, oh, look, I had a hand in doing some of this of the upfront work. So that's what kind of great about the job, about that career path. But what have you found challenging? So Caitlin, we're going to let you start us off, and then Ken and Sabrina.
This is a fun question. When you said it ahead of time, I thought about it for a little while, and I kind of have a short answer. So when you work in budget, at least in Virginia, you work for the city manager who works directly for the city council. And politics are not always rational. Numbers can be rational, right? And policy decisions can be rational, but that doesn't mean that that's going to be the outcome. And sometimes that can be frustrating, but you have to understand who you work for and why you work for them, and that they're the elected body and they're elected for a reason. Another thing is Virginia Beach is a young city, so a lot of its original staff is retiring or has retired. So there's been a lot of turnover in the city, and sometimes it seems like I've worked here the longest and I've only been here a little less than 10 years. And so there's less institutional knowledge, and sometimes that can make a budget analyst job difficult, especially because there's not as many people in other city departments to rely on for that historical knowledge. So a lot of people look towards the budget office for that. And most of my staff has only been here for, I think the average tenure is 2.5 years. So that can be a challenge too. But the biggest one is that politics is not rational. And even when you really want it to be, it's not going to be.
And as
And
soon as you
so-
said that, I saw heads nodding in agreement. I did just want to, before we go to Ken, I just wanted to point out that I think the statement that you made about the budget office kind of providing some of that institutional knowledge really kind of connected and resonated with me. So I appreciate that comment very much. Ken,
We also,
go ahead.
okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. We consider ourselves the city historians. Yes, we have a library, who keeps the official records. But the budget office has every budget document back to the 1950s. And if someone needs to know something, they're going to ask us. And we take that job very seriously.
Good to know. Ken.
I echo everything Caitlin said, and I will add when it comes to politics. The challenge that is there is there tends to be sometimes with young staff or new staff, I should say, coming into working in local government, is that there is a wall of separation in what you're able to do as a professional, and the fact that once an assignment is made, you do it, and you certainly should. But the fact is, you have to factor politics into the equation of what you do, in terms of figuring out what solution is the best, in terms of figuring out how certain recommendations are not only going to be received by your department heads and not even by also elected officials, but as you learn more about key constituencies, stakeholders, particularly those of you who work in jurisdictions with ward or district elected officials, you have to understand that those dynamics do play a role in what you do. And then what I would also say is understanding intergovernmental relationship that exists as well between local governments where Caitlin and I work, as well as state governments where Sabrina's working, and also our friends at the federal government. And obviously, let's go ahead, won't ignore the elephant in the room. Right now, those of us at the state and local level have noticed a very disruptive series of events that have happened. And it not only has the potential to affect all of us directly in the present, and certainly when the federal government is closing out, trying to finally adopt their current year budget, and then also looking at fiscal year 2026 and beyond, it is also the needs that we are indirectly involved with at the municipal level that's understanding the needs of our nonprofits. Much of how the federal government disperses its programs for community development, for social services, are done by nonprofits as on a reimbursement basis. Those agencies pay the money out, and then they ask the federal government for reimbursement. So naturally, a couple of weeks ago, when there was an attempted announcement of a system-wide freeze in disbursements, for a lot of nonprofits, that could potentially mean delaying payroll or facing other challenges because they've already put the money out. And so, and of course, what we also know, and we've had the experience, and imagine all larger municipalities, especially here in the Mid-Atlantic, have had this experience of when nonprofits don't have that money coming from the federal government and they have programs that are desired by their residents, there's a tendency to come look to somebody else to help close that gap, whether it be the states, obviously, or even municipalities. And so that is a factor that often has to be balanced. And of course, we don't print our own money. That's the biggest difference with the federals is we do not print money and we have to balance, and it has to be realistic when we balance. And so it creates some challenges because we're not only trying to respond to the needs of the day or the needs at a given time, we are also trying to think strategically. Our elected officials have strategic plans or strategic goals that they're trying to achieve. There are long-term issues that need to be addressed, such as those that require financing. I think there was conversation about bond referendum in Virginia Beach. Those have to be covered as well. In fact, that's the first obligation typically that we have, is to make sure we pay our debts. So there are a lot of issues we have to face. And then when other situations that can disrupt our environment occur, such as the impact of the Great Resignation over the last couple of years and what it's meant for us in terms of compensation, and whether or not those decisions we made or were made with respect to compensation are necessarily sustainable as revenue growth contracts and other factors have to be considered. All of those have to be factored in. And so it requires a lot of attention to different areas. You have to keep your ears open and your eyes open. You can't just focus on one specific thing at a time. And then you have to figure out how it all fits together. That's really the key to being able to be successful, because the end goal is, if you work in a budget office, is you want to present a budget to your city council or county commission that doesn't require them to do a lot of work. That's why you're being paid. And so you want to do 99% of the work for them, let them play in the margins a little bit, and then adopt it and go on from there. And so it requires a lot of attention, observation, and obviously objectivity in terms of being able to make that happen.
All right, Sabrina.
And I agree with everything that Caitlin and Ken said, and especially with Ken, is like we're going at the state level. It's like we get hit hard with a lot of that stuff too. First of all, one of the things that about working for the state is like you work for the state, but you really don't know what's going on at the local grassroots level. So that's to me, that's just a downfall. And so that's why in my job I get to go out, talk to directors at the counties, local agencies, and see what their needs are. But at the state, sometimes you get caught so much up with what's going on at the state that you don't see. You know what I mean? In our budget office, we see the money that we're giving out this money, but we don't really see exactly what the money is doing out there. We see when somebody misspends the money and mishandles the money and things like that, but we don't get to really see. So I think that taking the opportunity to go out and see where the money is going, what's going on, just like with Caitlin's example or whatever, I think that's not really done at the state level. It's you're able to do that at the local level, which I think is more of a benefit of being at the local level than it has been at the state level. Um, Another thing too is like Caitlin said or whatever, it doesn't make sense at times when you're at the whim of whoever the current governor is, depending on what his needs and wants are. I'll be honest with you, like right now, since the federal government put back all federal government workers go back to work, now our governor's put back to all state workers need to be back in by the 17th of March. And then it gets frustrating because in order to, like, for example, in order to save money during COVID, our agency sold off all of its real estate. We got rid of our leases. We're like, oh yeah, we've saved so much money. We don't have this going on, but it does not matter what is going on and how great it's going at your agency or whatever. What matters is the big picture. It is the big picture that somebody else said. Everybody go back to work, and so now they're following suit and having to manage all the people that I manage and them coming to me saying, well, we do our work. It's like you have to tell them it has nothing to do with your job, to be honest with you. It has nothing to do with how well we're doing our job, how well we're not doing our job at times. Sometimes there are decisions that's made up there based on what their theory is and how their theory is, but it's like you have to just go with the flow sometimes. I tell them sometimes I just got a ticket on the bus. And I'm just riding it. I don't know where it's going at times or whatever. And sometimes you got to be willing just to sit back and put your headphones on and ride it and see where it goes. And sometimes that's how government is. But I also wanted to say too, though, and to go back to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about like the things that we do in the offices, I just want everybody out there to understand too that, I know we're talking about budget analysts and we're talking about budget analysts in a way that is just generic, but there are so many different types of budget analysts. So when you're like out there looking for jobs and you're going a professional path, don't always just look for the word budget analyst. Look and see and read and see what they're doing, because like we have so many different descriptions because we're such a big agency that somebody be like a financial program manager is their title, right? But when you read what they do, you're like, oh yeah, they do analysis. You know what I mean? It's written all through their budget analysts. And so I just want to it makes it's like when you go to college and the only thing you know is to be a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant, and nobody tells you there's all these other different kind of positions and things that you can get, that you can get jobs for. It's like that in government or whatever. Yes, you're doing budget analysis in the budget office, but it may be called something different, and you may just be doing policy. So I just want everybody just to spread their whole purview of what they think a budget analyst does, and not just think it's somebody who sits in the seat and just do numbers and put numbers together and just look and analyze a budget. There's a whole purview of what you can be doing if you're in a budget office.
And I'll piggyback off of Sabrina's comment, because I think also if you think about performance analysts are also related to some of those different budget dimensions. So there are a variety of maybe different roles, but that have those connections back to financial management, or that have connections back to budget and analysis. So I did want to have kind of a follow-up discussion, because I hear from Sabrina that sometimes you just take things in stride and kind of go with the flow. But then I also hear Ken talking about sometimes having a role in strategic planning. So could you maybe, and Caitlin as well, could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on maybe that strategic planning role? I'll open it up. I don't know who wants to go.
So I guess I'll start, and Caitlin, if you want to kind of follow in, and I'll be honest, one of the challenges I've had in the jurisdiction that I work is we kind of have to pick up strategy as it happens. Formal strategic planning is not exactly our strong suit, but you can figure out, especially if you've been there long enough and are the historian, as Caitlin points out, um, decisions that were made in the past and how they still influence the present and potentially have the influence to influence the future. And so you start kind of building a list that is going to influence budgetary decisions, particularly those that your elected officials are going to have the most impact in. And what you really want to do, to the best of your ability, without telling them, you kind of have to just simply guide and advise and counsel, not tell or direct, is figure out how to show where there might be linkages between what they've wanted to do strategically and their perhaps more present or tactical concerns. Show how objectives that they may see in the present or objectives that need to be achieved in the present can align with long-term strategies, long-term goals that they have set for the jurisdiction or agency that you're working for. It's not an exact science by any stretch of the imagination. The work that GFOA has done in their development of what they feel like budgeting should be through the Distinguished Budget Award kind of gives you an outline of trying to put it all together. And that certainly also guides the purpose of performance management, which along with assessing efficiency in operations is also there to see how well are you doing at achieving the goals that are set by your elected officials. Those are just kind of some of the thoughts that I have and kind of the approach that we have to do because we don't have as much of a formal strategic framework as other jurisdictions have.
Caitlin?
Yeah, so can you summarize that pretty well? I will say that Virginia Beach is trying to have more of a strategic plan, and we always try to align the budget with that as much as possible. And I really like what you said the 2 questions ago, where you want to present a budget as close to what the elected body wants as possible, so they tinker around the edges and don't change, the meat of it. It's just so important to be a good listener when you work in public budgeting or finance. We listen and go to every city council meeting. That way, using that information to inform us on how to shape the next year's budget. It is so valuable to listen to the elected body so that they do just tinker around the edges with the final product budget instead of reworking the whole thing. I've been in budget years where city management wasn't as good at that as others, and we've had to redo from the ground up. And that's really hard to do, 9 months worth of work in, 3 or 4 weeks. So it is just really important to be a good listener. And I will say a challenge with that, at least in Virginia Beach recently, is that Virginia Beach did not used to have a ward system, but now does. And that just throws an entire new complexity into the budget process because members of the city council are now beholden to a individual district where they weren't before. And that has totally changed the game. And we've had to keep up with it as much as possible with the budget process, and it can be challenging at times because every district has different needs, but sometimes different elected people think that they should all be treated exactly the same from a budgetary standpoint, and that's not always possible either for a host of reasons.
And also, so I wanted to piggyback on what Caitlin said too, whatever. Also, another challenging thing too is like when you're working, like we report to the governor. So in Ohio, so when you're working and you're getting questions from, you have people over there who are Ohio senator and legislators, and the legislators, they don't really even know what's going on. So like you said, you have to listen and see like, okay, what can I get out of what they're saying? Because they really don't understand. They really know what's going on. And so sometimes, and when I say take it in stride and just it's like, no, you take it in stride and listen to them and you wait until your chance come to where you can, it's like, okay, let's see where they land. And then we can strategically, because when they're all over the place at times, it's hard to be strategic. So you have to pick and choose when to be strategic. That's a different thing too in government. So I just wanted to say that or whatever, is that when your legislatures don't know what they're talking about, not what they're talking about, they're just not aware of every single bit of because there's so many bills that come through to them or whatever, that you have to be helpful. And when you're providing data, I always say that you can make data say anything. So therefore, when you're providing data, you have to make sure that you're strategic in the data that you provide to them and how you're providing and how you interpret the data to them. For example, that's a way of being strategic also.
Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to transition a little bit. What advice do you have to offer graduate students interested in pursuing careers in this area? Sabrina, we'll go with you, and then Caitlin, and then Ken.
What advice? Here's my advice. My advice is go for it. I just always feel like whenever I see a position, whenever I see a position that I feel like I'm interested in, even if I feel like I'm like, maybe I'm not qualified for it, it's like, no, if it sounds like something you want to do, I say go for it, apply for it or whatever, if that's what you know that you're going to do, because you have to get in there somewhere. And unfortunately, some states like ours as very union oriented. So therefore, yeah, there may be a job out there that you know for sure, because it happened to me, that you know for sure that you're qualified for it. You've been applying for it or whatever. And then you call and find out, oh, your resume never gets up to us because it's union first. It's like, don't quit. Then what I did is I just applied for a lower job or whatever. And when you get in there, then that's when you can start taking off or whatever. But sometimes you just got to get in there, and you just got to take your shot, get in there how you can or whatever, and get in there, and then go where you want to go. So it just happens like that in some areas or whatever. Some may be easier, and Ken and Caitlin might have different experiences, but in my experience, that's how I had to get in where I was.
Would say that don't let anyone ever tell you that government budget or finance is boring. It's not boring. Don't listen to them. It's the opposite of boring. Um, Take internships if you can. I know that it can be challenging depending on where you are in your life, but internships really help you know what you may or may not like. Don't be afraid to take a job that you may not want to do forever. Sometimes it's important to have a job that you don't like so that you know what you do like. Um, that's kind of where I was with the Virginia Department of Health. I did not enjoy it. No offense to the Department of Health, but it wasn't for me. And it made me realize that I did love budgeting. And if you are early in your career, um, definitely look into be a budget analyst for like a general budget office, because you get to touch a little bit of a lot of stuff and it will help you see what you really want to do long term. It's a really good launching pad for your career anywhere in local government and probably at the state level too.
So if this is a career that interests you, congratulations, because it's one of the sectors that needs the most help right now. The same challenges that the private sector are having finding people in accounting and also in financial management or financial analysis positions, and budgeting does encompass financial analysis. That's an absolute given. Those are the fields that are struggling right now. And what I would say is the jobs are out there. The locations themselves may not be the most externally appealing. There are a lot of small communities, even towns in Virginia. Obviously, we got over 500 municipalities here in the state of North Carolina. The jobs are out there, so it's really looking for them. And I would say the same also applies to internships. I had to go out and find my internship when I was an MPA student because I started a semester late. And I ended up interning with a small town in Northeast Georgia near the South Carolina border with only a population of about 5,000. And they hired me to do their budget. They were hiring a grad student to basically build their budget for that fiscal year with about 90 days to do it. So that's how I got started. And the fact is that in those smaller jurisdictions where the resources are limited and where they can best gain the benefits of someone coming in for 10, 12 weeks, it's the opportunity you have to really learn the process. To get a good start, everybody lives somewhere. Go on your local community's website and look at your town budget or your county budget if you happen to live in an unincorporated area. It helps you understand how they've structured it. Even those states are different. Not everybody does it the same way. They do have a lot of similarities. And so really understanding kind of the structure, understanding fund structure, that's a huge part of what we do at the municipal level. Understanding the diversity of revenues are out there, understanding how expenditures are formulated. I realize a lot of this is covered in financial management. At the same time, not everybody necessarily necessarily pays attention to financial management in there, especially if it's in their first semester of study. So the fact is, you still got to get that time to look it over. And really, it's about learning as much as you can, paying attention to what you can. That observational quality that you have to do this work. You can't put blinders on when you get into the workplace. I've seen it happen, and it's usually not to the benefit of someone to do that. So those are kind of some of the key thoughts that I have in regards to this.
Can I add something else too? Also be true. I figured that I was a true student of public administration once I actually started working in public administration. And when I say be a true student of public administration, that means like don't just stick to like your textbooks and your stuff in the classes. Like think about something you may be interested in. Go in, like Ken said, you can find organizations around town and you can sign on to be on to their listservs. like when I first started working for the state of Ohio or whatever, I didn't know a lot about the state of Ohio because I hadn't even lived here that long because I had just came from Kentucky or whatever. So then when I was working here, I signed up for like our children's services organizations. I signed up for everything or whatever just to get their emails so I can read like what was going on and I can follow what was going on. So a lot of times just start to follow what's going on within the political realm or within your local realm or whatever. And a lot of times that will lead you to probably even knowing what you want to do, where you want to fit in. And it makes it more interesting because that's kind of how like what I did too, whatever. I saw where I really wanted to fit in, what I wanted to do, how I wanted to contribute. I guess that's the way we talk about it in public service, right? How do you want to contribute? And so you just have to figure out how you want to contribute and where you want to contribute. And sometimes you have to start out small, but just start signing up for all of those listservs and start reading things going on. And you're like, oh, and things will start clicking and start going to some of the events that Caitlin them's having, for example, or whatever. You know what I mean? And so I think that become a true student of public administration, because I'm still a student of public administration. At times, I have to stand back and look at what's going on in the state of Ohio, and I'm like, man, I could write a paper about this like right now. This would be a good research project right now, or whatever. And I'm just like, people are like, why are you laughing? I'm like, I'm just entertained at the moment as a student of public administration, not as an employee, but as a student of public administration. So I'm just saying, be a true student of public administration.
Thank you for that advice. I do want to open it up for questions, and it does look like I have a few questions in the chat. So one question is, what is the biggest challenge or adjustment for a budget analyst in training?
I can answer
Caitlin?
that one. There's no guidebook, there's no rule book, there's no how-to manual. You just have to be willing to learn. And I mean, we can come up with some manuals, right? Like for the boring stuff, right? Like the chart of accounts and fund structure. We can teach you that. That can be read and taught. But you really just have to be willing to learn and put in the time. And depending on your background, that can be challenging, right? But it's just really understanding that no one can tell you how to do it, and everyone's experience being a budget analyst is different. I have 10 employees, they're all very different people, and each of their jobs is a little bit different because you make it your own. They rotate different departments and different assignments, but it's more than just that. It comes with what they're interested in, what they're good at, and what they want to do with those departments and what those individual departments need at any given time. And sometimes it's challenging for people and they realize it's not for them, but more often than not, they realize that that's great for their own personal career development and to help them get where they want to go outside of the budget office.
Ken, anything to add?
Yeah, I would add, budgeting is an annual process for most of us. For some, it's biennial, but for most of it's an annual process. And that means that when you're working with staff across the jurisdiction or agency, this is the one time of a year they're doing this. And so it's not something that they're necessarily doing on a regular basis. You also have the opportunity to really build the skills of your fellow coworkers in an area that it may not necessarily be consistent with what they do on a regular basis. I do a lot of work with obviously departments across the city, and especially with our police department and our fire department. These are individuals that are highly trained in many aspects that also involve interpretation of law and the administration of law. At the same time, these are not individuals who are necessarily conditioned to the work of financial analysis and figuring out how to balance budgets. And so it's really helping them understand and trying to find the connection between what they do on a daily basis and what they need to do in order to prepare their budgets. I would also say the biggest challenge is developing the communication skills. And this is more of a soft skill aspect of it, whether it is working with your employees, fellow coworkers, as well as it is with elected officials and the public. There's an element that, they talk about participatory budgeting in the classroom. In a lot of cases, it's simply working to help explain what you're doing with the budget to serve the residents who are paying for the budget. So that is something that has to be developed, and it's not something that easily is developed. And I would also say the dependence and reliance on good written communication is also very important. And again, that's something you get. I'm an adjunct instructor as well, And there are a lot of fellow faculty where I teach that focus on writing research papers. Mostly I have my students when I teach classes write memos because that's the length and the tone of what they are going to be doing 5 to 6 times a week when they get into the office.
All right, so this next question I'm going to let Sabrina lead off with. And here's, I'll read it out loud. I have an MPA and I'm currently doing a PhD, both major in public finance. If I want to work for the government after my PhD, what levels of jobs are good fits to look for? I think my education is overqualified for entry-level jobs, but at the same time, I don't have any experience working in the government.
That's yeah, that is a big challenge. When you're trying to work in government and you have your PhD. But it depends on what did you want to, I guess it depends on what you want, what the reason you were getting your PhD. Because I felt that, because I'll tell you this, that at first I was going to work on my PhD at University of Kentucky. And then when I figured that that having my PhD did not equate to what I really wanted to do. It wasn't necessary for what I wanted to do. So I was like, okay, well, I'm cool with my MPA or whatever, because of the fact that I did not want to do those extra additional things that like PhD for like researcher and some of the writing things or whatever. And really nonprofits love PhDs, to be honest with you. So you may want to also look into some of that or whatever, but you have to be willing though yourself to understand that you don't have any experience in government. So you may or may not be overqualified for entry level jobs. I will tell you this now. When I first got my job for the state of Ohio, I knew my boss told me I was overqualified for the position. And some of us are overqualified, but he said that he needed to hurry up. He only had a few months to get the job, to get this program up and running. And he knew that we could get it up and running, and he had to teach us because we were overqualified. So you may think you're overqualified and nobody wants, but I'm telling you, if you match up or whatever, people will hire you or whatever. So don't feel that you're overqualified and don't apply for positions, but you just got to get in there or whatever somewhere, and not necessarily entry level jobs. There are other jobs that you could get in or whatever, because like for us, for example, there's like union versus exempt, and so you would be able probably to get into other jobs or whatever. If I were maybe to look at you right here or whatever and interview and see what you did, you just never know once you get an interview. It's not a lot of times all about that you have government experience, because sometimes we're looking for I would say fresh meat. I know that's I'd say whatever, because sometimes people who've been in government for a long time get just a little bit jaded. So we're always looking for some new people to get into government. So I'd say just try to apply for all levels to look for or whatever. Don't limit yourself, because there may be somebody looking for somebody with a PhD, but we can't, a lot of times we can't put that down on paper what we're really looking for. It has to be something that's politically correct and PC and what our union sometimes will agree with.
Caitlin or Kenneth, any kind of comments about that? How to overcome potentially or address that lack of experience in government?
I would say to take internships if you can. And really, I mean, Sabrina really covered it. Just put yourself out there for jobs that you think that you are qualified for. And if you have a good hiring manager and they feel like you're overqualified or underqualified, they'll help you figure out where you would fit. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen everywhere, but it does happen.
And I would agree. It's really about getting that experience as much as you can where you can. It will definitely serve benefit also on the academic side.
So there's another question. I'm in the MPA program, but not focused on budget. Anything I can do to prepare for this type of career, to get my foot into the door with this career path?
I did not focus on budget.
Me either.
Like I said before, that was not that was not our thing or whatever. It was not budget or whatever. It was I think preparing is like everything, all the things we just said, do or whatever. It's like get you an internship or whatever. If you want to get in the budget office, get you an internship in the budget office or whatever, or just get into state employment or local employment and see what it's like, and then you can move into a budget office. It just depends on you how you want to prepare it, but I think Ken even said in the beginning, it's not about numbers anyway or whatever. It's about analysis and about other things that you're doing or whatever. So you're probably already prepared, to be honest with you. You don't really need a budget focus. You're probably already prepared.
I will add that, yeah, you don't have to be budget focused in your MPA program to go into budgeting. It does help to have the skills in Excel. The initial work that you typically do when you join a budget office kind of builds that financial analytical part that you need. So certainly it's not a requirement. It's just having the ability to learn and to also have that high degree of self-motivation and the ability to know how to self-train. That is also essential. There a lot of what you need to learn. There may not necessarily be somebody there to show you all the ropes. So it's that ability to figure things out. That's important.
I just want to add that the budget course in my MPA program was my worst grade in the entire MPA program, and I think I'm doing okay. You don't have to be budget focused at all. You just have to be willing to learn.
I bet you had an amazing budget professor, though.
I did.
I accidentally overlooked a question. I'm not sure you guys will have the answer to this, but there's a question that asks, on average, what percentage of an organization's budget is dedicated to leadership training of director positions and higher?
I saw this question, and I will honestly say, as Caitlin points out, very, very little.
Very, very little.
Very, very little.
And
You're fortunate, depending on the size of a jurisdiction and how well built out their HR, if they have an in-house supervisor training program. Larger jurisdictions, more established ones do. We don't. And so even that's kind of the first level. Then when you start talking about more of general administrative management, division head, department head, again, that comes from experience and also a lot of investment that is made by the individual employee, whether they go back and get an MPA or an MBA, whatever the case may be, or they are in some jurisdictions, some departments may have training programs. For example, police chiefs and fire chiefs have typically state academies that develop chiefs kind of in-house. I've done budget workshops for the Fire Chiefs Academy here in North Carolina. So there are some programs like that, but generally speaking, in-house senior level administrative programs, it's pretty much up to the employee as a way of showing their interest and commitment to that level of employment.
in our experience at the state, it always depends on who's in charge at times too. Like it depends on, like right now we have a director who is into career exploration. He's into making sure that higher ups get leadership training. And then our governor, because I was in like a leadership program for the Governor's Leadership Academy and things like that or whatever. So it depends on who's in charge and how they want to focus on this or whatever. So like Ken said, you have to also have you have to do it yourself. It's your own road that you have to take in order to get leadership training, because most of the jobs in government are like, hey, we've been looking for somebody for 3 years. Here, come on, we're going to toss you in there and you're going to just start doing it. And most of it's on the job training.
And MPA programs do not prepare you for supervisory skills. No collegiate academic program is going to be able to prepare you for that.
No, none will at all. No, I have a psych degree, which helped a little bit, but yes, nothing. Yep.
It's either get a degree like that or go be a coach. That's basically the only two ways that you learn. So.
Yep.
But I want to thank everyone for joining us and thanking ABFM and Career Pathways for collaborating to get this workshop organized and going. And thank you so much to our panelists. It was so great to see you and very much appreciate the insights and the advice that you had to offer. Thank you so much.